The New Orleans Saints cornerback room proving once again that they're not just one of the best units on the team. They might be one of the deepest groups at the position in the NFL. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network on SI. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look back at the last couple of padded practices for over the course of the last couple of days and taking in some of what we've seen even before that to kind of give you a here's where the state of some of the biggest questions are for the New Orleans Saints now on their day off here on this Thursday. We're going to take a look at the new level that the second level of the New Orleans Saints defense has taken its game to. We're going to dive into the rotation and what's going on the offensive line, as well as that wide receiver with so many opportunities now available. And we're going to kick things off with the Saints' strongest position group, the cornerback room, which is making an argument right now that it might be the deepest at its position across the entire NFL. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. The New Orleans Saints cornerback room has consistently been its best position group on its team for what feels like a while now, especially last year when we saw the Saints effectively have four starting caliber corners on their roster between Marshon Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor, and Isaac Yiadom. This has been the strongest unit on the team. And now they've swapped out Isaac Yiadom, but then drafted Kool-Aid McKinstry, who has been, in my opinion, the most impressive rookie of New Orleans Saints training camp thus far. Taliesin Fuanga, of course, not far behind on that, the first-round offensive lineman, but we'll get to him in just a moment. To me, Kool-Aid has been incredibly impressive. And some of it has been the situations that he's been put in. Having to work on the outside almost immediately with Marshon Lattimore being out with injury right now, nursing that hip flexor, or rather rehabbing that hip flexor injury. He's been thrown right into the fire and has handled it incredibly well. He's also had a couple of moments pre-snap where he's been a little bit lost. Where do I go? Who do I line up over? And he gets the help from the defense, from his teammates that he needs, settles down, immediately locks out of confusion and discombobulation and right into focus and confidence and composure. And he's done this on a couple of occasions. He's also stonewalled wide receivers in one-on-one drills and has absolutely manhandled some of these guys as well in drills like jammer drills over on the punt return side. He has just impressed everywhere that he has gone thus far, although he has lost some reps here and there, which is what you do expect for any rookie that is coming into the NFL. But I think that he helps to solidly make this New Orleans Saints cornerback room one of the deepest cornerback rooms in the NFL, maintain their reputation from last year coming here into 2024, because they will have Marshon Lattimore available at some point, although he's nursing that injury right now. Paulson Adebo looks like, and Dennis Allen even said this himself, he's picked up exactly where he left off last year after having a stellar 2023 performance. Now he's already started to carry that over. And I mentioned in yesterday's live show that Alontae Taylor looks like he is set up to be a completely different version of himself in 2024. And I think a version of himself that will be even better than he was in 2023. We've heard from a lot of Saints coaches that they believe that Alontae Taylor's ceiling last year will be his floor this year. And he is having a standout camp that so far proves that right? At least gives us an idea that that's going to be right and gives us a glimpse into it. His confidence is sky high. His capabilities are way up there as well. He is far more comfortable, it looks like, in that slot role. He's being asked to do some of the things that really back what it is that he does well in terms of being physical, getting hands on receivers, all those other things. He's excelled in those one-on-one opportunities. He and Chris Olave went one-on-one four times on Wednesday's practice, and it got a little chippy, got a little chirpy, but that didn't get chippy. It didn't get chippy, I shouldn't say it, but it did get chirpy, right? The guys just talking back and forth to one another, talking about holding, defense, or Chris Olave telling the defense, don't clap for that junk, I'll just say, and all this other stuff. But even in the midst of the jawing and the chirping and everything like that, they're also kind of comparing notes. There was at one point where he was like, all right, well, I'm trying to do this and you're doing this, and then the other one's like, no, here's what I'm doing, here's what you can do, here's what I'm doing, all this other stuff. And so like they're also like helping each other. I don't know, it was so interesting and so fun to watch. But when they went one-on-one four times, Alontae Taylor won the first 3 reps from the looks of it. Now, Chris Olave, of course, was contending that there was some holding and things like that there. But look, in these one-on-one drills, which are severely weighted towards the wide receiver, sometimes you just take the win as a DB when it comes to those reps. And certainly you take the wins as a defensive coach when it comes to those reps as well. So big training camps for all 3 of those guys so far. And then hopefully they're able to get Marshon Lattimore back at a reasonable time and get him back out on the field. He did make his first appearance back out on the field on Wednesday's padded practice, the final one before today's day off. And he was in sweats out there in the hoodie, shorts, and everything, and was out there watching. And that was his kind of first appearance. But it's always good to see the player that's dealing with the injury still appear and be around and be outside and stuff like that. So that's typically a good thing when they're spotted by media. So that suggests that his rehab process is moving along, although there's no reason to rush it because you can plug Marshon Lattimore in week 1, and practices, and he's going to be your best corner on the team. Like, there's just no doubt about that. So they're going to be fine there. I also think that guys like Rejon Wright, as well as Shamar Jean-Charles, have made that cornerback position an even deeper spot. And guys like Ugo Amadi, as well as Will Harris, who can come in and contribute at nickel, give you even more depth and make that room even deeper. I look at a guy like Shamar Jean-Charles, by the way, as somebody that is playing to his strengths in this offense. He typically gets lined up in the outside when they go to second team. When he's playing out there, he plays to his strengths. He's physical. He's fast. He is very calculated. Look, he gets lost in coverage sometimes or gets beaten in coverage sometimes, but that's what you're going to expect from your 5th corner on your roster. That's okay. But can he go out there and also make some plays? Yeah, he's made a couple of plays that have led to interceptions by other players, tipping the ball up, getting his hands on the ball, things like that. And he contributes a lot on special teams, which he did at the end of last season when he was originally brought in while the Saints were managing all of their injuries, including JT Gray, who was dealing with injuries during that season. So I think guys like that contribute and help to even make your room deeper and deeper with this top 4 that you've got that are all starting caliber. Having some guys at the 5th or 6th spot that can contribute in all these other areas and give you viable depth. That's a pretty unique situation to be in. And some of that has to do with what the New Orleans Saints defensive system asks these corners to do and getting the corners in the building that can do it, right? Like playing to their strengths or finding guys whose strengths match what it is that you want to do over on the defensive side. It's clearly working for them thus far. I think the Saints have, again, found that their cornerback room is their best room. And I think we're again going to see that this New Orleans Saints cornerback room isn't just the best position group here. It might be the best of its position group across the league. Coming up next, I want to take a look at the rotations going on the offensive line as well as at wide receiver because they are a little telling. I'll explain why as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. I told you about last week when John Hendricks and I used the day off to go to an Angels game. Well, the WWL team and I are planning on doing it again tonight, going to another Angels game as they take on the Rockies. So we jumped on the Game Time app so that we could purchase tickets all in price, which means no hidden fees at the end or anything like that. All in price. That includes the ticket, the fees, whatever it is that's there. $6 a ticket. If you really want to get some good seats as well, if you want to go and move down a little bit or something like that, $11 a ticket, all in pricing. It doesn't get any better than Game Time. And look, those tickets might even get cheaper as we get closer and closer to first pitch. There is no better place to go for buying your MLB tickets than Game Time. Head over to the Game Time app. Give it a download and use that promo code after you create an account, LOCKEDON NFL. Locked On NFL is going to give you $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that promo code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints have been doing some interesting shuffling, and a lot of it on the offensive line as well as over at wide receiver. And while some of it is out of necessity due to injury, I still think that the order in which some things are being done and some of the decisions that are being made, I still think some of that is telling. We'll break down why as we continue on with today's episode. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen. And I want to tell you something really cool that Locked On has done. This is a first of its kind. It's never been done before. We released a sports-centric news 24/7 stream on YouTube. Locked On NFL covers only the sport of the NFL. So if you want to figure out what's going on around the National Football League from the local experts, and you just want to have something playing in the background, stuff like that, the 24/7 stream is available for you at Locked On NFL's YouTube page, as well as on the new free Amazon Fire TV channels app as well. So make sure you go and check that out here. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The first evers just keep racking up here on Locked On. Very proud to be a part of that. So, the New Orleans Saints offensive line rotation has been interesting because I think that it's telling us a lot about how the Saints feel about one player in particular that could be of huge value to this team, and that is veteran offensive lineman Lucas Patrick. So the Saints were without Nick Saldiveri, who has been starting at left guard. When Nick Saldiveri has been out, typically Lucas Patrick has been in at left guard. Then they're typically using Taliesin Fuanga at left tackle. That has not changed. That looks like that's going to be his spot. He has not strayed from that position. He has not played anywhere else. No one's really stepping in place of him when it comes to first team reps. He's taking some additional second team reps at the position as well. He's getting a lot of work there. So I think we know where Taliesin Fuanga is going to end up playing. And Chase Young, of course, very complimentary of how Chase Young plays, the demeanor with which he plays, how strong he is, how good he is, all that kind of stuff. Erik McCoy singing his praises. It seems like all things are going very well for Taliesin Fuanga. I did say earlier that Kool-Aid McKinstry to me was the best rookie in camp. The reason why I put him there is because of the fact that he's been contributing from multiple spots. Taliesin Fuanga has been at left tackle only, so his job is a little bit more focused than what Kool-Aid's is so far. So that's why I give Kool-Aid a little bit of an edge. But no doubt about it, things have been good at left tackle. Center has been Erik McCoy. Right guard has been Cesar Ruiz. Absolutely no surprises there. And then for the most part, we've seen Trevor Penning holding down right tackle. Every now and then we see Landon Young rotate in there. Then, of course, in the second and third teams, things swap out too. But we've seen a lot more of Trevor Penning at right tackle than not Trevor Penning at right tackle when it comes to the first team. So that's good news for him. Where things got tricky on Wednesday is that Erik McCoy got a veteran day, like a rest day. Okay. So he was off. So with him not at center, instead of the Saints going to another player to play center, which was challenging without Shea Lemieux, who had been getting some center work. So they needed to figure out how they were going to break out all of their center snaps, because really the only other pure center on the team is Sincere Haynesworth out of Tulane, who was holding down a lot of the second, third team reps, stuff like that. So what they did was that they moved Lucas Patrick from left guard to center, which is a position that he has starting experience playing. He has starting experience playing at center, left guard, and right guard. So there's a lot of value in terms of what he can bring you there. And then they took Ali Udoh and plugged him in over at left guard. Now, that didn't go well for the Saints on Tuesday or on Wednesday. The combination of not having Erik McCoy in, the combination of a new, forgive the word, again, the word usage of this again, but combination of what's going on with the offensive line in terms of like a new literal combination of 5 offensive linemen. Then you add into all of that the fact that the defense is very aware of what it is that the offense has already installed and is anticipating it really well. It led to a big problem of a day for the New Orleans Saints offense. Their passing game couldn't get off the ground consistently, although they did still make some big plays. The pass rush was poignant, to say the least, breaking through, constantly flushing quarterbacks out of the pocket, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't what you expected when it came to it was a bad day for the New Orleans Saints offense. I don't think that means you have to be concerned about the offense as a whole. Like I said, if they needed to field an offensive line this weekend, I'd be concerned, but they don't need to field an offensive line this weekend for week 1. They have much more time between now and then. So I wouldn't push the panic button on it just yet. But what it does tell you is that they really like the fact that Lucas Patrick can move around, because they did what they wanted to do in terms of moving everything around, but wanted to keep him in the first team. And so when they kept him in the first team, the way that they did it was that they said, okay, well, we'll just move him to another position and then give somebody else an opportunity there. So they're looking at him as a guy that can help to anchor that interior and then be a go-to player, kind of like a little bit of a James Hurst, but on the interior, right? The Saints loved that they could plug him in at either side, on the inside and out, right? Out at tackle as well. That's what they loved about James Hurst. Here with Lucas Patrick, you can kind of play him at all 3 of those guard spots, or interior spots, rather, both of the guard spots and the center spot. Then you've got guys like Aliudo that can play inside and out, although him playing on the inside has not been his strongest. He typically performs better on the outside. And then Landon Young can play inside and out. So if you're looking at like the top 5 guys that could potentially make this roster, I think the big thing you have to figure out is who's the guy that's Nick Saldiveri or Lucas Patrick. Because if it's Nick Saldiveri that ends up being the top 5 guy, I think Lucas Patrick is an absolute lock to be your 6th offensive lineman there because of what he can do in terms of contributing on the interior. But then if Lucas Patrick wins that left guard spot, that also makes a lot of sense. So it'll be interesting to see which way the Saints go. But I could see a path here to where Lucas Patrick is your starting left guard by the time that the season begins. Up next, I wanted to take a look too at the wide receiver rotation, because I think that tells us a lot as well. There was no Cedric Wilson, no Equanimeous St. Brown, no Bub Means on Wednesday's practice. Chris Olave, who suffered a bit of an injury at the end of Tuesday's practice, coming down hard on his hip, was back out there, no restrictions, did everything, did not seem limited at all, participated in all team drills, everything like that. So when the Saints had gone out with their first team to roll out their 3 wide receivers, the 3 guys that we saw out there were Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and then most of the time, Mason Tipton, although we did see A.T. Perry rotate in there as well. But I thought that it stood out to me that Mason Tipton rotated in a little bit more. Now, there's some logic behind all that too. Chris Olave is one of your top wideouts who's typically going to take his snaps on the outside. Rashid Shaheed typically takes his snaps on the opposite side as well. And so really the spot that you're filling most of the time when both of those receivers are out on the field is the slot role, which is not A.T. Perry's strength, but it is a place where you can deploy another speed option player like a Mason Tipton. So that might explain why we saw more Mason Tipton in with the first team than we saw A.T. Perry in with the first team, because then you'd have to move Chris Olave around, things like that, which they like to do. They have no problem doing it, but don't really do it at more than maybe 30% of the time over the course of the season, at least thus far. We'll see how that changes in his new role. But I thought it was pretty telling, at least, to see it was those guys, in particular, Mason Tipton, that ended up moving up quite a bit into those first team reps over some other guys like Kevin Austin, like Jermaine Jackson, all that. So I thought it gave us a pretty good indication of where the Saints sit when it comes to their wide receivers, not including Cedric Wilson, Equanimeous St. Brown, and Bub Means. Although I think Mason Tipton, just to be fair, has been the most impressive standout wideout outside of their top 2 guys. So I thought that gave us a little bit of a glimpse into the minds of how the Saints feel like their wide receiver depth chart is shaping up, at least thus far. Coming up next, I want to take a look at the second level for the New Orleans Saints, the linebackers, who are reaching a new level of playmaking. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sports betting partner here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You know, right now they're making sure that sports keeps sporting all summer long. And the way that they're doing that is by giving all customers a free bonus or boost every day. That means that there's something for everyone every day, all summer long, over at FanDuel right now. So you can get in on MLB games. Not the Astros, the Angels, of course, are hosting the Rockies here in town while we're in Irvine. Maybe going to go check that game out later. 1.5 point favorites. Go and see if maybe that's something you want to get in on. There's also parlays you can do for hits and runs and all this other stuff as well. They make MLB betting a lot of fun over there at FanDuel. So make sure you go and check them out. And again, enjoy those free boosts or bonuses every day all summer long. Just head over to FanDuel.com right now to start making more out of your summer. Visit FanDuel, which is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The most impressive unit for me for the New Orleans Saints so far this training camp, as they go into their day off today, the New Orleans Saints do, has been the linebacker room and just the next level that they have taken as playmakers. We appreciate you very much, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day for your second listen. Don't forget to go and check out Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs over at Locked On NFL Scouting, giving you a exclusively unique vantage point into the intermakings of the NFL. They do a lot of really, really great coverage on roster building, team development, all of these pieces, kind of looking at the league from a general manager's perspective. Really, really good, smart football talk. Go and check it out over on the Locked On NFL Scouting, either their YouTube page or wherever you get your podcast. All right, so when it comes to linebackers, we know right now the big story around linebackers is that Demario Davis left practice on Wednesday with a hamstring injury during the linebacker tight end one-on-ones. So obviously that story is going to dominate everything when it comes to this position group, and rightfully so. If the Saints don't have Demario Davis, it's not just that their linebacking core gets worse, their entire defense struggles because of that. That is a big time loss, right? That has some big ripple effects. Now, I don't know that we're looking at a hamstring injury here that's going to impact anything having to do with the season. I'm mostly just discussing, based upon what we've seen with Kendre Miller, that things can take a little bit of a while for you to be able to get back out on the field in practice. And a guy like Demario, there's no need to rush him, wrap him in bubble wrap, and get ready to see him week one. You're fine. It's not like he's fighting to make a team here. But I do think that along with Demario Davis, what we have seen from Pete Werner and Willie Gay in particular, Willie Gay, of course, the new addition this offseason, has been really, really promising in terms of what that New Orleans Saints second level can develop into in 2024. I've discussed on the show before that I feel that the place where the Saints defense can take a major leap outside of its pass rush is playmaking at the second level and that linebacker room. And Demario Davis, we already saw kick camp off with a pick six. We've seen Willie Gay constantly making plays in the backfield, blowing up run lanes in the run game, getting his hands on footballs in coverage as well, making all those types of plays. Same thing for Pete Werner, who seems to always make the number or the first big defensive play every single practice, filling some run lane. And you can hear Coach Michael Hodges at the backside of the field yelling, good job, Petey, rooting him on and giving him an old attaboy and all these other things. We see this day in and day out all throughout training camp thus far. It's the only thing that's been super consistent, right? One of the only things that's been super consistent in terms of a position group that has been performing. I like what we're seeing from that level so far, and it doesn't stop at the top three guys, Demario Davis, Pete Werner, Willie Gay. We've seen some good things from Anthony Orji, who has had a fantastic camp so far, probably his best camp that we've seen, really his best practices that we've seen. And remember, we've been watching him through previous training camp, previous mini camps, these mini camps, this training camp, as well as practice every single week because he was on the practice squad all last year. So him coming back and being a part of this team, you can clearly see has allowed him to grow quite a bit, being in his second year in this system. Another guy is DeMarco Jackson. I had somebody say something the other day about how DeMarco Jackson's always a camp stud, but never really pans out in the regular season and stuff like that. And I don't really have a recollection of DeMarco Jackson ever really being that camp stud. This feels unique that he's out here making plays constantly in the run game, making some plays in the passing game as well, and has continued to contribute as a special teamer, as a core special teamer. Like, this is a guy that has future special teams captain ability and leadership ability in his bag. And so I think this has been unique in terms of what we've seen from DeMarco Jackson, that he's found moments to stand out on defense. I'd still kind of put Orji a little bit over him in terms of standoutness, but I think that his ability to contribute in multiple places, as we talk about all the time, and especially with the new kickoff rule, that's going to be really, really important. And that's going to make a major difference for his, or help make a difference in his opportunity here to solidify, grab onto, and hold on to your roster spot. What's going to be interesting is how many linebackers the Saints keep on their active roster. they could get away with just keeping 5, having a couple on their practice squad, and then elevating if they need to, especially those standard game day elevations which can help you out on special teams and things like that as well. But it's going to be really interesting because do they keep 5 or do they keep 6? A guy like Khaleke Hudson, who has starting experience, 6 games. He started for the Washington Commanders last year, has played a lot of special teams throughout his career as well. Specifically talked about joining Coach Rizzi because of the focus that this team has on special teams, all of that. I think that he ends up being a guy that can enter the conversation and make things interesting as well. And I don't want to leave out guys like Monty Rice. I don't want to leave out a guy, an undrafted free agent rookie like an Isaiah Stalbert, who have each also made plays in their own right as well. But I'm just highlighting kind of the fact that like the playmaking ability that we have seen so far from this second level for this New Orleans Saints defense, I think can take them an even longer way as a defense. It always felt like if the Saints were kind of getting carved up in any place on the defense, it was always in the middle of the field. And look, that's not just on the linebackers. That would be on, safety responsibilities on switch offs or receiving switch offs, corner responsibilities for communicating those switch offs, depth of the field and what the offense is kind of creating for you based on their motion and things like that. Like there's a lot that impacts all of it, but having sort of that sideline to sideline linebacker playmaking playability hasn't really been the brand of these linebackers. These linebackers in New Orleans have typically been downhill big plays like that, like Demario Davis getting tackles for a loss or 6.5 sacks over the course in each of the last 2 seasons, or doing a good job of carrying tight ends and running backs in coverage up the middle of the field. The Saints could potentially feel comfortable having Willie Gay handle a slot cornerback if they ever needed it, right? Like if it's a 3rd and short and you're not necessarily sure if they're going to run out of 11 or going to pass out of 11, you could still go out there with 3 linebackers and hope that and have, a Willie Gay at will who can come back and help you support in the run game, but then also carry a tight end or a slot corner if you needed him to in coverage. It would not be the end of the world to have that. So I think that this linebacker room gives the Saints an even more expansive amount of disguise that they can deploy, and also allows them greater flexibility and greater preparedness for multiple things in the same look over and over and over again. So it could be really interesting how the New Orleans Saints utilize that. But I do think that linebacker room in particular, and the coaching of Mike Hodges and the player coaching of Demario Davis has really, really taken some steps forward in terms of what we've seen here so far through 2024's New Orleans Saints camp. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much for being here for another episode of Locked On Saints. We'll be back here tomorrow with another one for you, getting you ready as padded practices continue over the course of the next couple of days, and then things begin to slow down a little bit after that. We'll take a look ahead. What are we looking for next? We got that coming up for you on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. And as always, if you see me, please say hi. Need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.